Jace walked through the quiet alien market, looking for ship parts and something to eat. His boots crunched over the dust-covered ground, and the twin suns above made the air shimmer like fire. Most aliens avoided him, they always did when humans came alone, but Jace was used to it. He didn't care about stares, whispers, or the odd looks he got. He just wanted to fix his ship and get off this forgotten colony. As he passed a stall full of glowing fruit, he felt a tiny hand tug at his jacket. He turned fast, ready to react, but stopped when he saw her. She was small, barely to his waist, with soft gray skin and wide golden eyes that shimmered with tears. Her arms were too thin, and her voice came out in a whisper. "She's lonely, human. Please make my mother smile again." Jace blinked, unsure if he heard her right. "Your mother?" he asked, crouching down. The girl nodded. "She hasn't smiled since father left. Since he died." The words hit like a quiet punch. Jace had seen war, had lost people too, but why come to him? "I'm not from here, kid," he said softly. "I know," she said, with hope in her voice. "That's why the stars sent you. Before?" Jace could respond. The girl turned and walked away. She didn't run. She walked slowly, as if she knew he would follow, and strangely, he did. She led him past quiet homes and through glowing forests, where tall trees hummed softly with energy. The light from the leaves painted the ground in shifting colors. They climbed a hill where a lonely house sat, half hidden under vines and dust. The girl opened the door and looked back, waiting. Jace stepped inside. The house was silent. Too silent. No hum of machines, no music, no laughter, just still air and shadows. He saw faded photos on the wall, war medals in a cracked case, and one old music box on a shelf. In the corner of the room, a tall figure stood still. The alien woman stepped into the dim light. Her face was soft, but tired. Her eyes hollow like someone who hadn't slept in years. She wore a long faded robe. Once beautiful, but now dull. Her gaze passed through Jace like glass, not really seeing him. "This is him, Mama," the child said. "He's from the stars." The woman said nothing. She only nodded slightly and turned away. She moved to the window and stared out, her back to both of them. Jace stood there, feeling awkward. "I think there's been a mistake," he said to the child. The girl shook her head. "No mistake." She whispered, "I dreamt it. A man would come from the stars, and you'd make her smile again." Jace sighed, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't his problem. He should leave, fix his ship, and be gone. But something about the child's eyes, something deep and aching, held him still. He noticed the music box again, dusty and silent. He gently opened the lid, and a cracked melody played, broken, uneven. The sound made the woman freeze. She turned her head slightly, but her face stayed cold. She walked away, disappearing into another room. "Why is she like that?" Jace asked the girl. The child looked down, her fingers curling into her small hands. "Because if she smiles, she thinks she'll forget him." Jace felt a weight in his chest. Grief he knew too well, and yet something told him this woman's pain went deeper, like roots twisted under stone. That night, the child gave Jace a blanket and made a small spot near the fireplace. "I don't have much," she said shyly, "but I'm glad you're here." As he lay there under the soft hum of the alien woods outside, Jace stared at the wooden ceiling. He should leave in the morning. He didn't belong in this house, in this broken place. But as the wind carried the faint sound of the child humming to herself, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Just one more day." The next morning, Jace woke to soft light and silence. The fire was out, and the air inside the house was cold. The child had left a warm cup of some alien tea beside him. Carefully placed with both hands, he sipped it. Its taste strange but comforting. Jace stood and looked around the room. The house was quiet, too quiet. He walked past the main hall and found the mother Laurie standing again by the window. She didn't turn, didn't speak. It was like she existed only as a shadow, present but unreachable. The little girl came running in with a piece of folded paper. She held it up, smiling wide. "Look." I made a drawing of Mama smiling. She held it up to her mother's side, as if hoping the drawing would make it real. But Lyra didn't look. She turned and walked to her room, her steps slow and heavy. The child's smile faded, but she didn't cry. She only folded the paper and placed it near the window where her mother had stood. Jace sat beside her, unsure what to say. "She does this every day?" he asked. The girl nodded. "Every day I try to make her smile, but she never does." "Have you ever seen her smile?" The child looked up once when Father was here. Jace leaned back against the wall, watching the child as she walked to the broken music box. She opened it, and the broken melody played again, twisted and cracked. Was that her favorite song? "Yes," the child whispered. "It played at their wedding." Jace stood up and took the box into his hands. The gears were rusted, the crystal speaker was chipped, and part of the winding spring had snapped. "I think I can fix it," he said. The child looked up with eyes full of light. "Really?" "Maybe not perfect, but better than this." He spent hours at the table, using bits from his toolkit and parts from his own broken communicator. He cut, rewired, soldered, and tested again and again. The child sat beside him, watching quietly, her eyes wide with hope. Finally, with a deep breath, Jace wound the music box and opened the lid. The melody came out smoother this time, soft and slow, but whole. It filled the room with something that hadn't lived there in years. The sound floated down the hallway and reached the woman's room. She didn't come out, but Jace saw a shadow under the door. She was listening. He left the music box on the table and stepped outside, needing air. The village beyond the hill was just as quiet as the house. Jace walked toward it. Curious people glanced at him and looked away. He walked into a small local archive built from old stone, where a glowing orb held the town's public records. He searched the names and found Hersliera Carl, decorated war captain, widow of Commander Ashen. Carol, she had fought beside humans in the Battle of Braxis Ridge. Her mate had died shielding a human transport ship from a blast. After the war, instead of honor, she had been shunned. Some aliens blamed her for the Alliance, for loving the wrong side. They said she brought shame to her bloodline. Jace closed the record and clenched his jaw. It wasn't just grief that haunted her. It was betrayal by her own people. She lost everything for a cause, and that cause never said thank you. He returned to the house just as the sky turned orange. The child was sitting on the floor, building something with wooden blocks. Lyra was back at the window, arms crossed, watching the sky. Jace stepped forward, holding a small crystal cube he found at the archive. "I found this," he said gently. "It's from the war memorial. It belonged to your husband." She didn't turn. He placed it on the table near her, and then said softly, "He died saving my kind, Lyra." Her shoulders tensed, but she didn't speak. He didn't fall for nothing. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and tired. He was brave, but he was foolish. Jace nodded slowly. "Maybe. But he loved you, didn't he?" She closed her eyes, breathing in sharply. "Yes," she whispered. "And I loved him." Jace stepped back, not wanting to press more, but as he turned to leave the room, Lyra said, "She looks like him. Our daughter." It was the first time she called the child ours, and for the first time, her voice held a crack, not anger, not pain, but something close to feeling. That night, the music box played again. The child hummed along with it, and Lyra, though silent, sat in the same room with them. She didn't speak, but she didn't walk away, and that, for now, was enough. The days passed slowly on the quiet planet. Jace stayed longer than he meant to. Something about the silence in that house made him feel like leaving would break something important. He worked during the day, helping with repairs around the home. Sometimes he went to the market to get supplies, but every night he returned to the same quiet space, one where a little girl still hoped, and a mother still stared at the stars without blinking. One morning, Jace woke early, before the sun rose. The child was still asleep, curled under a blanket near the cold hearth, but Lyra wasn't there. He stepped outside and saw her sitting near a broken sculpture just outside the house. It looked like a memorial, half buried in overgrowth. The sculpture was cracked down the middle, one half missing, the other showing the faint shape of a man's face. Jace stood quietly beside her, not speaking. After a long pause, he said, he had strong features. Lyra didn't answer, but her fingers gently touched the stone. My father carved it, she finally said. After we bonded, her voice was soft, almost carried away by the wind. Jace could hear pain wrapped inside every word. Why leave it broken? He asked. Because I don't want to forget it cracked, she replied, like everything else did. Jace wanted to tell her she was wrong, that things could be repaired. But he saw the tired weight in her eyes, the kind that didn't come from just one loss. There was more beneath the surface, and Jace needed to understand it. That afternoon, while the child napped, Jace went back to the village. This time, he went deeper into the archives. He asked the keeper, a pale-skinned alien elder, for any restricted files from the war. The old being narrowed their eyes at him, but allowed access. After all, Jace was a guest, maybe even more than that now. The files told the real story. Commander Ashen Carroll, Lyra's mate, was once a hero. He led a squad of elites who partnered with humans in the last stand against the Haraxis Reavers. During the final push, Ashen saw a human troop transport about to be destroyed. He left his position and used his personal shield generator to block the blast. He died instantly, but the humans lived. The problem was, the Alien Council blamed his death on emotional compromise. They said Lyra influenced him to put humans first. Jace's jaw clenched as he read. They stripped her of her honors, called her disloyal. Her tribe turned away from her. No one came to her home after that, not even to mourn. Only her daughter stayed by her side, unaware of why the world turned cold. Jace returned that evening with a data chip in his hand. Lyra was in the kitchen this time, preparing tea with slow, careful movements. He placed the chip on the table. I read about Ashen today, he said. She froze, her hands still. I saw what they said about you. And what they hid. Lyra said nothing, but her eyes flicked toward the chip. You didn't just lose your mate, Jace continued. You lost your name, your place, your friends. A long silence passed between them. Then she spoke, her voice low and flat. I was proud of him, she whispered. But they turned that pride into shame. They were wrong. Jace said firmly, he saved lives. And you stood by what was right. Her hand tightened around the teacup. They said I loved a human cause more than my own blood. The little girl walked in at that moment, holding a flower she had picked outside. She ran to her mother and placed it in her hand, smiling, blue like father's eyes. She said cheerfully. Lyra looked at the flower for a long time, her lips parting slightly. Then she placed it gently in a small glass near the window. That night, Jace sat by the fireplace while the girl played with toy stones. Arranging them into shapes, Lyra sat nearby, not at the window, but in the same room, for the first time. She didn't look like a ghost. She looked like someone slowly waking up. Jace told a story about Earth soldiers who planted flowers on their helmets to honor fallen friends. The little girl laughed and said, "That's silly," but Lyra asked, "What kind of flowers?" Her voice was softer now, curious, alive. Jace smiled. "Daisies," he said. "They grow fast, even in ruins. Lyra looked out the window where a patch of dry soil waited for rain. "Maybe we should try planting something here," she murmured. The child gasped. "Really, Mama?" Lyra nodded slowly. "We'll need seeds." It wasn't a smile. Not yet. But it was the first sign of life in a long, long time. The sun set slowly over the quiet alien village. Golden light touched the broken rooftops and the trees with glowing leaves. Jace sat on the porch, wiping grease from his hands after fixing a broken solar panel. He looked out across the hill, thinking about everything he had learned. Behind him, inside the house, laughter echoed, not loud, but real. The little girl was telling a story about a dancing goat she saw once, and Lyra, her mother, was actually listening, not speaking, not smiling, but listening. Things were changing, slowly, but Jace knew they were still far from healed. Later, that night, the little girl tugged his sleeve. "There's something coming soon," she said in a hushed voice. "What kind of festival?" Jace asked. "The Festival of Flames," she whispered. "It's for the ones we've lost." She explained that every year the people of the village light lanterns and float them into the sky. Each lantern carries a memory, a wish, or a name, but Lyra hadn't joined in since her husband died. She never lit a lantern, never watched the sky. She says she doesn't have the right. The child said sadly, "But I think it would help her." Jace looked at the girl and then at the dark room behind them. He made up his mind. The next day he went to the market and traded old tools for materials, thin metal rings, paper that glowed under firelight, and a special kind of sky crystal that helped the lanterns rise higher. He spent hours building a lantern himself, folding it with care. He etched Ashen Carl's name across the base and added one of the metals Lyra kept hidden. When the lantern was ready, he didn't tell anyone. He just waited for the right moment. The day of the festival arrived, and the village lit up in colors. Even the quiet ones came out, dressed in long robes, carrying small lanterns lit from a central flame. Children ran laughing with glowing strings, and music filled the air. But the house on the hill stayed dark. Lyra didn't go. She sat near the window again, the light from the village reflecting. In her eyes, Jay stepped outside and lit the lantern he built. The wind was gentle. Perfect. He let it rise, and the lantern floated high above the house, carrying the name of her lost mate into the sky. Lyra stepped outside slowly, wrapped in a long cloak. She looked up and froze when she saw the lantern. The little girl ran to her, pointing its forefather. She said, "Jace made it." Lyra stared at the glowing light as it joined the others in the sky. Hundreds of lanterns floated like stars being born. "I didn't ask him to," she said softly. "I know," the child replied. "But he did it anyway." For a long time they stood in silence. Then Jace walked up beside them, holding another blank lantern in his hands. "This one's yours," he said, gently offering it. Lyra looked at it like it was something heavy, something sharp. "I can't," she said, stepping back. "I'm not ready." Jace didn't push. "I'll leave it here," he said, placing it on the steps. "If not tonight, then someday." He stepped away and let her decide. Hours passed, and the sky turned deep purple. The music from the village grew faint as people returned to their homes. Jace sat by the fire, tired and quiet. He heard a soft sound and turned. Lyra stood near the steps, her hands holding the blank lantern. She looked unsure, her fingers trembling, but she stepped forward. The child ran to her and held the small flame they had saved from the market. "Use mine, Mama," she whispered. Lyra nodded and lit the lantern with her daughter's fire. The flame caught, warm and gentle, and the lantern glowed with soft orange light. Lyra whispered something as she let it go, words in her own language. The lantern lifted slowly, dancing up into the night with the others. As it rose higher, her hand remained in the air a moment longer. Then, slowly, she brought it down and turned to face them. Her face was not smiling, but her eyes were no longer hollow. She looked at Jace and then at her daughter. Her voice came softly. "Thank you. Both of you." They walked inside together. The little girl laughed and told them how she would make her own lantern next year, and for the first time, Lyra said, "I'd like that." It was not healing all at once, but it was the first time. Lyra chose to remember without fear the first time she sent her love into the sky instead of locking it inside. And in that moment, Jace knew he was no longer just a visitor. He was part of something now, something that was slowly being reborn. The days after the festival felt lighter. There was still sadness in the house, but it didn't feel so heavy anymore. Lyra began helping around the home again, sweeping dust, fixing broken shelves, even humming sometimes when she thought no one was listening. The child smiled more now, following her mother around like a small shadow. Jace watched it all quietly, knowing not to speak of the change too loudly. Sometimes healing was slow, and silence was part of it. One morning, the child found seeds in a pouch she had hidden long ago. She held them up like treasure. "We can plant them in the garden now." Lyra looked at them and nodded. "Yes, we can try." They worked together outside, digging in the dry soil, planting the seeds with careful hands. Jace added drops from his water purifier to help them grow faster. Hope was planted along with those seeds, and for a while, everything felt possible. But hope, like weather, can change without warning. One evening, the sky turned dark too fast. Clouds moved like heavy smoke, rolling in with thunder that shook the hills. The villagers locked their homes tight, and lights blinked out one by one. Jace looked up and felt a chill crawl down his neck. "A storm's coming," he muttered. Inside, they gathered by the fireplace. The child sat curled under a blanket, and Lyra held her close. Lightning flashed outside, followed by a roar of wind. It wasn't just any storm, it was a sky storm. A violent surge that hit the planet once every few years. Jace remembered the warnings from the archive. "Stay inside, stay low, and don't chase the lights," the old texts had said, but the lights were beautiful. When the wind began to howl, small glowing orbs floated outside, tiny sky spirits. As the villagers called them, they weren't alive, but they danced like they were. And children often chased them, not knowing the wind could change direction in seconds. Jace heard the front door creak. He jumped to his feet, but it was already too late. The little girl was gone. Lyra stood frozen, staring at the open door. "No," she whispered. "No, not again." She ran outside into the storm, calling her daughter's name. Jace grabbed his coat and followed, the wind cutting into him like sharp glass. Rain slammed down in sheets, and the glowing orbs floated between trees like silent ghosts. "Over there," Jace shouted, pointing at a flicker of movement near the old garden. They ran together, slipping on wet stone and mud, and then they saw Hurt trapped under a fallen branch, her arm pinned, eyes wide with fear. Lyra screamed and dropped to her knees, trying to lift the branch. Jace joined her, putting all his strength into it. The wind howled around them, pushing harder every second. On three, Jace shouted. 1, 2. Now, the branch rolled away, and Lyra pulled her daughter into her arms, holding her tight. The child coughed and clung to her mother, crying hard. "I saw the lights, Mama. I thought they were calling me." Lyra rocked her back and forth, whispering something over and over. Jace couldn't hear the words, but he could feel the meaning. She had almost lost the last piece of her heart. Back inside, Jace wrapped the girl in dry blankets while Lyra lit a fire with shaking hands. She didn't let go of her daughter, not even for a second. Tears streamed down her face, not just from fear, but from something deeper. "I wasn't there when Ashen died," she said suddenly, her voice breaking. "He died alone." Jace looked at her, not sure what to say. "I couldn't lose her too," she whispered. "Not again. Not ever." The child stirred and opened. Her eyes slowly. "Mama," she said weakly, "I don't want to chase lights anymore." Lyra gave a small, broken laugh, one that ended in a sob. She kissed her daughter's forehead. "You won't have to." That night, they all stayed close, the storm shaking the house but not the bond between them. Jace watched Lyra as she sat near the fire, holding her child like a treasure she almost lost. Something had cracked inside her, but not in a bad way. It was the kind of break that lets the light in. When the storm finally passed, the stars returned to the sky. Jace opened the door and stepped outside, breathing in the clean air. Lyra joined him, her cloak wrapped tightly. "She almost died tonight," she said softly. "But she didn't," Jace replied. "Because you ran after her." Lyra looked at him, her eyes full of emotion. "She is everything to me." "And you are everything to her," Jace said. Even when you couldn't smile, she looked up at the stars. "I want to smile again," she said quietly. For her, Jace nodded. "Then let's start tomorrow." And from that moment on, something changed again, this time not in silence, but in strength. The morning after the storm was soft and golden. Rain had washed the dust from the trees, and the air smelled fresh and clean. Sunlight spilled through the window like a promise, touching the wooden floor of the small house. Lyra stood outside, barefoot in the wet grass. Her daughter sat nearby, drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Jace leaned against the doorway, watching them. It was the first time he saw peace in Lyra's posture. She wasn't staring into nothing, she was present. Inside, the fire crackled gently as Jace prepared breakfast. He had found some strange Japske. He had found some strange alien fruit in the market the day before and decided to try slicing them. The skin was slippery though, and as he cut one open, the soft center popped and squirted juice across his face. The child burst into a giggle. Jace blinked in surprise, wiped his face, and said, "That fruit just attacked me." She laughed harder, clutching her belly. Lyra turned, confused, and stepped inside. Jace tried again, this time gripping the fruit tighter, but his fingers slipped, and the whole thing flew from his hands and smacked the wall, sticking there like a bright pink blob. The child howled with laughter, tears in her eyes. Jace looked at Lyra, ready to explain, but then it happened. A sound, soft at first, escaped her lips. A breathy chuckle, then a small, unsure laugh. Then it grew, warm and real. Lyra actually laughed, and it was beautiful, the kind of laugh that had been buried deep for too long. The child's eyes widened. "Mama," she gasped. "You're..." Laughing, Lyra covered her mouth like she didn't know what to do with the sound. But it was too late. Joy had already escaped. Her shoulders shook, and she leaned against the wall, laughing until she had to sit down. Jace stood frozen for a moment, then smiled quietly. He didn't say anything he didn't need to. The child ran into her mother's arms, still giggling. "You're smiling, Mama." Lyra looked at her and nodded. "I am." After that moment, something shifted completely. Lyra began to speak more. Not just to the child, but to Jace too. She asked about Earth, about music, about the way humans honored their dead. Jace told her stories, some funny, some sad. She listened with bright eyes, her expressions soft and alive. The child sat between them each night, holding both their hands as the fire glowed. One evening, Jace showed them a small human device. It was a holoprojector with saved memories. He activated it, and floating lights appeared, images of Jace's own family. His parents smiling in a garden, his brother lifting weights too big for him, his little sister dancing in circles in her room. Lyra watched in silence, her hand tightening around her daughter's. "Do you miss them?" she asked. Jace nodded. "Every day, but you still smile," she said. "I do," he replied. Because their love didn't leave, Lyra looked down at her child, who had fallen asleep beside the fire. She deserves laughter. She Whispered, "Not just survival. She deserves you," Jace said. "This version of you," Lyra looked at him, her eyes shimmering not with sadness, but something warmer. "Thank you, Jace." "For what?" "For not walking away." The days that followed were filled with small joys. Lyra began cooking again, even experimenting with Earth's recipes Jace described. She tried to make pancakes once, but they turned green and wobbly. The child said they were alien cakes and demanded them every morning. Jace tried to pretend they were tasty, but his face betrayed him. Lyra laughed again, freely this time, one evening. They all sat around a table, eating a stew made from local roots and herbs. The child stood up and made a small speech with a serious face. "I declare this family night," she said proudly, "and we must have one every week." Lyra smiled and raised her bowl. "I agree," she said, "to family night." Jace lifted his own bowl, clinking it gently against hers. "To family," he echoed, later when the child had gone to sleep. Lyra and Jace sat on the porch under a sky full of stars. She didn't wear her cloak that night. She didn't hide her scars or her grief. She looked peaceful. "I never thought I'd laugh again," she said softly. Jace looked up at the stars. "Sometimes it just takes one person. Or one small reason." She turned to him, her voice quiet. "You were that reason." They didn't need to say more. The silence between them was full of understanding, full of healing, and above them, the stars flickered like lanterns, like the past, now lighting the path forward. The garden outside the small house was blooming. Tiny green shoots had pushed through the dry soil, dancing gently in the breeze. Lyra stood with her daughter, watching them grow. "Look, Mama," the child said. "They're alive now, just like you." Lyra smiled, pulling her into a soft hug. "Yes, just like me," she whispered. Jace sat on the edge of the porch, polishing a tool from his ship. His repairs were done, the systems were running, and he could leave any time, but he hadn't, not yet. Every morning he told himself he would go, and every evening he stayed. He'd grown used to the child's laughter, Lyra's soft voice, and the warmth of their fire. He told himself he was just being polite, making sure they were okay, but deep inside, he knew that wasn't the whole truth. That afternoon, he finally brought it up. "I should be leaving soon," he said gently as they sat around the table. The little girl stopped eating, her smile fading fast. "You're leaving?" she asked, her voice small. Jace nodded. "My ship's ready." Lyra didn't speak right away. She stirred her spoon in the bowl, her fingers tense. "You've done so much already," she said quietly. "We can't ask for more." Jace looked at them both. "I wasn't waiting for you to ask," he said. "I just didn't want to go until I was sure you'd be okay." "You've helped us more than you know," Lyra said, her eyes on her daughter. "She helped me too," Jace replied. "You both did, that night." He began packing his things, tools, clothes, parts. He didn't have much. The child came to the door and stood there silently. Then she walked in and placed something in his bag. It was the music box, the one he had fixed. Jace looked at her, surprised. "I can't take this," he said. "You fixed it," she replied. "So it belongs to you too." He smiled, then gently closed the lid and handed it back. "I'll come back to hear it play again," he said. "Promise." "Promise." Early the next morning, the house was quiet. Jace stood by the door, ready to leave. Lyra approached him, her steps soft but sure. "You saved us," she said. "Not with weapons, not with machines, but with patience." Jace nodded. "Sometimes the heart needs more time than the body." She reached into her robe and took out a small pendant, one made from sky crystal, shaped like a flame. "This was Ashen's," she said, placing it in his hand. Jace hesitated. "I can't." "You can," she interrupted, "because he would have liked you." He accepted the gift, feeling its warmth in his palm. Then, without thinking, he took her hand. It wasn't romantic. Not yet, but it was full of understanding. "You'll be okay," he said. "I know." She replied, her voice steady, "And so will you." The little girl came running up, clutching something in her hands. It was a flower from the garden, still wet with dew. "This is for your ship," she said proudly. Jace smiled and tucked it into his jacket pocket. "I'll keep it safe." The moment stretched between them. No words felt big enough, so they just stood there, letting the wind speak for them. Jace turned and walked to his ship at the edge of the hill. He paused at the ramp and looked back one last time. Lyra stood with her daughter in her arms, waving softly, and as he looked at them, he saw at her smile, wide and real. It wasn't broken anymore as the ship lifted into the sky. The wind carried the child's voice. "Come back soon, Starman." Jace flew higher. Past the hills, past the clouds. He didn't feel like he was leaving something behind. He felt like something had been given to him, something invisible but strong. A bond, a reason, a promise, far below. In the little house with the blooming garden, Lyra sat beside her daughter. She opened the music box and let it play. The melody filled the air, soft and full of memory. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "We're not alone anymore." The house that once held only silence now echoed with music, laughter, and love, and under the stars, a new light had been born, one that would never fade.